Hey.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. As Diana mentioned, my name's Noopur, and I'm a product manager here at UiPath. Just a little bit about me. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years now. When I started with UiPath, I actually didn't know anything about RPA. So I was completely new to the industry. I was doing something very similar to you as far as learning about the product and getting more familiar with it to get more involved in the industry, and found myself in a position where I was actually a sales engineer here and then pivoted into product. So I came from a totally non RPA automation background, and now I'm kind of in the core and the forefront of the work that we're doing here, both on the AI side as well as on specifically the discovery side. So really excited to chat with you all today. For the most part, as Diana said, this is a fairly open forum in the sense that you're more than welcome to put questions in the chat as we're going through. Because we have a dedicated amount of time, I'm going to be hitting you with a lot of content. So if you have questions, feel free to pop them there in the chat, and I will try to address them towards the end or as we're going through. So as we're getting started here, I'd just like to kind of level set with folks what we're talking about. So we're just going to dive right into it. And specifically, obviously, today we're talking about task mining. But I wanted to kind of introduce task mining to you as it is as a concept that sits within the larger discovery suite. So task mining is specifically a technology that uses a recorder desktop to go ahead and capture data from employees' machines to go ahead and get insights into what we might be able to automate or optimize. And really what this is understanding how work gets done. So we know that all of the organizations that we work at, there are all these different applications. And in order to complete one task, you usually have to context switch through a lot of those different applications. And so what we do is we actually go ahead and we say, well, in order to figure out where to automate, or where to optimize, because sometimes the end result isn't always automation, we need to know where to start. And so, in order to truly understand where to start, there are a few different ways that you can collect that data. And really, I'm skipping through some of these slides because I want to focus on the meat of what we're looking at. The way that we do that and the approach that we use is called our discovery suite. Now, we're going to focus on task mining today, but you may have heard things like process mining or communications mining or automation hub. Those are all components in our discovery suite. The way I explain it to folks is it's basically different approaches to collecting different kinds of data depending on what your needs are. In the example that you have a large organization that probably has a large ERP system, we're frequently using process mining because we can use the processed logs from the system of record, meaning that ERP like SAP or Salesforce, to collect data and visualize it to identify those opportunities. However, what we recognize is that many times you don't have those logs. So you might use communications mining or task mining to collect data from different sources to go ahead and visualize and understand where problems lie, with obviously the end result being optimization or automation. So today's focus is task mining. However, my recommendation to folks is always to take a look and take a step back and look at discovery as a whole, because frankly, where we're going, and we'll talk about this as well, is a more integrated, unified approach to this. It's using all of these tools rather than in silos, but together as one to get all of the data perspectives you might need to make the right decisions. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the technology, but the key here, and I think the biggest takeaway beyond the how, is the why. Why are we collecting data, right? We as organizations need to make sure that if we're investing in automating and optimizing, we're investing in the right areas, which mean high ROI, return on investment, opportunities that we feel we will save time, save employee effort, and save redundancy or error prone manual input for those employees. Now, as we mentioned, the way that we do that is through this desktop data recorder that we're looking at. So I've already kind of introduced the concept of what and the how, but really the what and the how is task mining using this desktop recorder we put on machines to collect data in both a larger scale and a scoped scale to understand it. Now, you can tell here that we do that in a few different ways, but really what we're looking to do is a few different steps. Deploy that recorder, collect the data from your business needs, and then use somebody like you or somebody else in your organization that you might work with to truly digest that data. And that's the human in the loop piece. How do you go ahead and really take this into data that's raw and turn it into something actionable? And we'll look at a few examples here as well. As we're going through those actionable insights, we might then decide, okay, we need to share this with the rest of the organization. So how do we take data that we think we can turn into a high ROI opportunity for automation or optimization and share it with our COE and share it with our leads and share it with our business process owners? Well, we have ways to do that built into the product. So we're looking at that as well. I'm going to skip through some of the pieces here because I want to focus on the parts that I think are most relevant to you. But the persona that we're really focusing on, I would probably say here is that red one, so business analyst reviewing the data, and then the purple one on the right, which is the employee actually capturing the data. So I'm going to show you the product in the perspective of both of those personas so that you can understand what it's like to both capture and review. But those are the components that together need to work together, and the people that together need to work to be able to get this into that actionable outcome. As I've mentioned, this is only one way, right, that you can discover. We have process mining, we have comms mining, we have ways to actually capture and keep this data in Automation Hub. But really, what we're looking at with task mining is scenarios where people have disparate systems. So I always like to highlight Dexcom because we're looking at a large healthcare customer here within North America that had a ton of disparate systems. So in this scenario with this large system, we usually would say, hey, can you use an ERP? Can you use process mining to look at that ERP data and visualize it for you? And they said, not at all. Both, we don't have the logs from the EHR or the ERP that we're using, but also we have folks moving in and out of different applications. We need to visualize these task graphs across those applications. That's where the root of task mining came into play here, right? And what they found is not only were they able to save some time, but they really got that understanding of where are the high ROI opportunities for them to double click into. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So I always just highlight this as an example of kind of where we're coming from. Now, I'm going to stop sharing screen really quick here and provide you with some high level information, which I think is relevant, which is where's the origin of task mining? Now, task mining actually came from an acquisition for UiPath. We acquired a company called Stepshot. Some of you may have heard what it turned into, which is task capture. Now, what I always tell folks is task capture is a also desktop recorder, but it's kind of our origin story. It's where we started and where we kind of stopped and evolved from, right? So with task capture, you will see the ability for end users or business needs to go ahead and capture their end-to-end flow, add some things like different elements of additional flow mechanisms, swim lanes, different primitives from BPMN. But really the end goal is, hey, so-and-so capture your business flow and share it with the COE lead. That technology was rooted in this desktop recorder, but also was rooted to kind of be and set to be an individualistic approach, meaning me as Noopur might just work on my own. And if I get to a final state with it, I would share it with somebody else in my COE. What we realized from that is we need a much more collaborative approach to this. The reality is that business needs need a way to capture the data and communicate it to business analysts in a much faster time to value. And we need to be able to get this data to the business analyst to review to turn into actionable insight much faster. So task capture is still available. There have been rumors, are we going to deprecate it? Are we going to get rid of it? We're not deprecating it. It's still there. If you want to use it on premise, you can. However, where we are actively investing as a product is what I'm going to show you, which is more along the lines of assisted task mining and data capture at scale. So I do like to call that out. It's the origin story for us and we won't let it go. But it's not where we're actively investing. We've taken the best parts of it and moved it forward into a more collaborative environment. The second thing I always like to tell people is this is a cloud first product, and so are most of the discovery products. So if your organization is not cloud first, that's okay. We have some on-premise offerings. However, much of what I show you will be in the cloud and likely deployed in the cloud first with a plan to do quick follow-ups into on-premise or automation suite, whatever that offering might be. So I always like to give people that prerequisite of what you might see may not be exactly what your organization has access to, but it's relevant content on where the product is going. Awesome. Let's continue into actually looking at some data. So I like to start from the get-go. For the most part, most of you, have used the product before. But for those of you that haven't, I like to show some demo data just so you can get familiar with it, right? So what we've done so far is we've established the origin of task mining, where we're going with it, and what the root technology is, which is that desktop recorder. Let's see it in action, right? So historically, what we have offered, and this is a cloud demo environment, is the ability to create different projects or subsets of the way that you segment your tasks. Now, to be a successful organization that's running multiple task capture data sets or task mining opportunities, what I tell people is think of the project as your distinct task or the thing that you're looking to truly double click into. That's how you want to segment it. Two things that happen within that. One, we can give you different permissions and access within the project, but two, you can also then export project level or sub project level data that's relevant to you. We don't do data movement across projects. So once you put it in the project, it's staying in that scope. And that's why I always tell folks the best practice is to look at it either by a segment of group of people, this department, this project, or get even more specific and say this specific task within this department, this project. Now, projects can vary. Right now, our primary two offerings are assisted and unassisted task mining. We'll talk a little bit about what we have in preview as well, which is workforce intelligence and where we're going. But when you create that project, you might see something like this. So this is an enabled tenant that has the preview of workforce intelligence, which is our active preview we'll talk about in a second. But we also have this task intelligence component. Now, by default, the fastest time to value, especially for a cloud customer, is to start with assisted task mining. Why would I start with assisted task mining? Well, the reason why you're starting with assisted task mining is because it's capturing known tasks. It does two things: uses that recorder technology and introduces it to the business users in a quick time to value. And two, introduces the concept of reviewing and analyzing data to your business analyst very quickly, right? And a lot of the other tasks that we have or the projects that we have, they can capture data well and analyze the output well. However, they are a little bit of a longer term approach. So I always tell folks, if you've never used it, start with assisted task mining, especially if you're a cloud customer. It's a cloud only product right now. I'm hoping to bring it to Automation Suite next year, but I'm working on that. And really start here because it's that quick time to value. You can always, if you're not an on-premise customer, you can always spin up a trial of Automation Cloud and we can get you started there just so you can get exposure to it. It's a good way to introduce the recorder to your business users. So let's go ahead and start a little test project here. Now, again, I've decided the scope of projects in this scenario is going to be a very specific instance. So let's say the task at hand is a weather test. Every day we have multiple instances of going and checking the weather and putting that data into X place, right? And that is the task at hand. Now, I have some advanced options here. I have language support. So we actually support Japanese as well as some other officially supported languages. And you'll notice I'm now giving you the option to go into unassisted task mining. I didn't lead with it because it's a faster time to value to start with assisted task mining than unassisted. This is confusing because I've now introduced the concept of two different projects. So I'm going to take a step back. What was assisted task mining? Well, it's the default option. It's capturing a known task. So it's all about the context that you want to set with your project. Well, what is unassisted task mining? It's really what our old historic, product offering was, which is take a department, capture them for 2 weeks or so, and then use a machine learning model to output the tasks for you. Clear, simplified distinction. I know the task or I don't know the task, right? Start with scenarios where you know the task, you will get faster time to value. You may know the task at a high level, but you probably don't know the metrics you need to truly determine it to be a high ROI opportunity for optimization. Later down the line, the recommendation is if you want to use unassisted task mining, you can. However, I always tell people that it requires significant business analyst effort, and that's why I'm not leading with it. And I'm fully candid with customers about this, is it is an intensive project that requires some input to analyze that data. Start with the easier one. So let's go ahead today for the purpose of the demo. We'll start with the easier one, and we might go ahead and actually add our recording users here. So when we were talking about personas, we said we care about the business analyst persona and we care about the recording user persona. The person setting this up is usually the business analyst or someone from the COE, and they're engaging the business. So in this scenario, we said, okay, we've got weather test, and that's the specific task that we're wanting to capture. Let's go ahead and engage a subset of people in our department. Now, you may have a department of 75 people. You do not need every single one of them to capture data, right? We just need enough sample data to get a holistic view of what needs to be optimized or automated, not every single instance. So here we might say, okay, I'm going to add John. I think he's been here for about 2-3 years, so he can go ahead and capture some data. I'm going to add Akhil because he's been here and he's worked with this weather test in different ways. And I think he's going to have some things. And then maybe I'll add somebody who's newer, right? And I might say, oh, Anvita's newer. She just got trained. I want to see how she interprets this task, right? So now what I've done is I've understood the business users from different perspectives. Now you could also take this and you could say, I'm going to add one business user from each region. I've got an EMEA region, an APAC region, and a US region or Americas region. And I want to see how these people capture this task. It's all about the intent that you have, right? Behind the data that you're looking to get. Is it variability across users, across tasks, or across regions, or different kinds of inputs based off of maturity of that user's understanding of the task? So this time I just took, different folks were trained different ways. I want to see how they're doing it. Now, what you're going to see is something very similar if you've ever used task capture for a landing page. It looks almost the same, right? The difference is it's in the web. It's collaborative here. We can share this project. So we have the option to capture trace or build trace. If we build trace, you're basically looking at a Visio-like flow. Manually build the flow, add some screenshots in, and build a diagram from there. That's great. However, the faster way is to actually capture the trace. So two things happening here. One, as a business analyst, I am now this project administrator. I've created the project. I can capture a trace to contribute if I'd like. However, I have also invited 3 people. They are all going to get emails that directly send them to this link in a secure manner once they authenticate themselves to do the capturing themselves. So there are scenarios where you as a business analyst might be involved. There are also scenarios where recording users are simply contributing and you're reviewing that data. For the purposes of today, let's assume I was a business user. I got an email, I clicked on the link, and I'm going to go to capture trace. You're going to see a pop-up here. Now, if I did not have the recorder, meaning the MSI package, which has the desktop recorder on it, I would get an automatic download, right? I would just go ahead and recognize that I don't have that application and it would go ahead and automatically download it. I, however, already have it downloaded and installed. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it. Any regular business user, it just goes ahead and recognizes that they don't have it. It's their first time going there. They're going to download and install. Really what we're going to do here is then go ahead and click start and we're going to start to record. Now, when we start to record, the key to success, and I always tell people this is kind of the key to success across all desktop recording technology, but it's training your end user to understand the goal of the task at hand. The task at hand is that we want to capture distinct traces of how somebody does a weather test task without as much noise as possible. Now, what is noise, right? Noise is other applications that I don't think are relevant to what we might optimize or automate. The reality of humans and human work is that they get notifications, they multitask, they're on a call while they're doing this, they work things in parallel. That is totally fine. However, in order to get us the cleanest version of data to review, both for execution time as well as for the different flow of context switching through applications, we're going to ask them, especially for the first few projects, to really just focus on the task at hand. So we're going to train them, and we actually have FAQs and best practices on our docs about this, to say, hey, mute your notifications, close out the apps you don't think you need for this task at hand just for now, and give me one instance of doing that weather test, right? So let's just say I've already muted because I'm on this call, I've already muted my notifications. In this scenario, actually, if I had another screen, I would probably move my Zoom screen over as well. And I would clear it out until it's just what I need to focus on for that task at hand. And I'm gonna go and I'm gonna say, all right, I need to do my weather test. So I'm gonna look up the New York City weather. And as I'm typing and clicking, you can see it's capturing everything on my screen. Now, I don't have another monitor right now because I'm on my singular laptop. So I have my Zoom window open. So you can see it's actually capturing my Zoom window here as well. What I would want to do is move that off the screen, off the monitor, and it's capturing every click and type. Now, I might go and collect the data and say, oh, this is the data that I care about. And I might go copy it into Notepad. And that was the task at hand, right? So what I've really done at this point is I've simply just exemplified that I had different clicks and types. I could go to different browsers, applications. It could be a local application, a terminal, multitude of different applications, right? And I've collected data from it and I've moved it from point A to point B. Now, across the point of doing this, let's say I get a phone call, I get a Microsoft Teams call, or I get a Slack huddle. I can pause. I can say, hey, Akhil's calling me and he wants to ask some questions about the task that he's working on. I can pause. The key in training your end users is to recognize, okay, if you pause, you've got to resume and you've got to pick up where you left off. The less noise we introduce, the better the output, especially those first few times, just makes it easier across the board. Once we have completed the task at hand, we can go ahead and click end. It's going to automatically upload that data. And just for the purposes of today, I'm actually going to cancel this upload and I'm going to show you some data that's already there. So we had an incident management scenario. So we said, hey, we've got a few different folks that open different kinds of tickets and resolve them in ServiceNow. So we did the same thing, created the project, we invited the folks, they went and they recorded. A couple things we did right off the bat. We looked to see if we wanted to mask PII off the bat. So that was something we could enable, and we enabled that. We also asked if we wanted to anonymize the recording users' names. Now, this has been particularly helpful for our European friends who have some issues around exposing potential user data or have concerns around that. And it's also great for just including the users' support when they know that, that their names aren't being looked at, right? So they're a lot more comfortable with that. So we did mask PII here. And we can see here that for every single instance, I have clicks and types. Now, each person who's contributing to this, this is a demo data set, so I've contributed mostly, but we have some few other folks here that have contributed. Their icons are here because I chose not to anonymize user data, so I'm keeping that open. Each instance of a distinct recording is called a trace. Now, what is a trace? A trace is really just completing the recording of the task from start to finish and contributing that to the project. We try to keep the terminology across the board, across all different projects, fairly similar, but they do vary in some places. Traces are pretty consistent. You're going to see them to be distinct instances. Now, if I had done that recording 4 different times, even if they all came from me, those would be 4 distinct traces, right? Each time I click start and then end, that's a trace. Within that trace, we can see here that I have an image and it's telling me exactly what I've done there. Now, every single click and type, auto hotkey, and movement between application is captured with the screenshot in assisted task mining. We'll talk a little bit about where the technology is going in the future because it's not every screenshot for every click and type. But here you can see that I have an indication of, was it a mouse click? How long did it take and where exactly did it happen? Now, had I chosen to provide a description in that box there, I could have also had a test description here, right? And I could have had, oh, this is me actually opening up, blah, 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 right? So you can tell your business user as much detail as you'd like them to add. It's up to you as to how much you really want to train them to contribute to the task. To accelerate the process a little bit, right, I'm going to move forward. But really the key here is my goal was to understand how everybody's doing it because they have been trained in different ways. Now, with that goal in mind, I'm going to go ahead and review each of these traces. Now, these are fairly linear flows. You can see that they've started and ended, and that's about it. In reality, we know that people are usually doing different kinds of work and going in and out. So what we might do with these linear flows is do a true comparison from person to person. So we might say, hey, again, so-and-so was trained differently than the first person that recorded. First, I might clean this up and I might say, hey, I think they went to the wrong kind of screen here. They don't usually do resolution information, right? So I can actually go in, I can edit the step name, but I can also delete the step. Now, the key is if I delete it, you can't get it back, right? We auto save, you can do an undo button right here, but I might clean things up just in case something comes up. So perfect example is maybe Akhil called me. I forgot to press pause before I opened the call. So I got a screen of the call, right? I can remove that. You can manually add steps. However, you will be asked if you manually add steps to add the screenshot to add the input information. So you want to keep it so it's more information and then you scope it down. This tends to be some of the most intensive parts of these projects is the business analyst or the business SME cleaning up the trace to get it into a truly readable format. Now, these traces are very small. The maximum amount of actions for a trace is actually 500. And I know folks that have well around that number. So you can get quite long with these. That's why cleaning them up is key because you want to keep, again, the less noisy options and you want to keep the data that really matters. The reason why we want to keep the data that matters is as we visualize and understand this data, and you can see that there's some basic metric information, execution time, mouse clicks, things like that. The goal is to understand similarities, differences, and outliers. So to do that, we want to be able to compare them against each other. This is a key feature that Task Capture does not have. Up until now, we were pretty similar to Task Capture other than the fact that we're in the web here and we have a collaborative project environment. Now we're getting to the point where we might actually use ML or AI to go ahead and find similarities or differences. Now, one of the things we can do is merge the traces. Now, there are two types of merge. We might do a guided merge or an auto merge. Auto merge leverages our machine learning algorithm, which uses the clustering of screens, so looking at screen similarity, to see what steps are similar and different, while guided merge actually says, hey, you don't trust that the screens might be similar or different because they might be actually all very similar but completely different tasks. I know the business context. I'm going to merge them together or decide what steps are similar or different. So guided merge is a more hands-on experience. Auto merge is a more hands-off, and then you kind of can edit from there. So we auto merged a few traces here, and we found that there actually were some differences. For example, the EMEA team goes to a different landing page than the Americas team does. And then we might see that actually within even the page that they all go to, there's some different similarities in the browsers or the way that they navigate through those. We can decide as business analysts, now that we're reviewing this data, if this is relevant to us. So we can also edit this. Now that we step back here and decide, right, at this point, was this something that we got interesting output from? At this point, the most two frequent pieces of feedback I get. One, you may have masked too much. We take a very conservative masking approach. So maybe you turn off PI masking and you look at those again. Two, you gave me the similarities and differences, but now I don't know what to do with it, right? I don't know how this impacts the larger group. Well, this is where that business analyst persona is really going to break down what the similarities and differences are. You have really distinctly like two easy outputs from this. One, we create a PDD and we hand it off to the developer and we say, hey, this is your most comprehensive picture of what you need to automate. These are all the possible different scenarios that different teams might approach this task in, right? This is your comprehensive picture. Or we hand it off to maybe another business analyst. And we say, hey, people are deviating in all these different ways, right? When it's this kind of incident, they're doing this. But when it's a different kind of incident, they're doing something else, right? High priority is getting worked completely different than regular priority. Let's optimize. What this does is ground you in reality of the data. So both the execution time and how long people are spending with their clicks and types, but also the flow of the context switching. That's kind of the key. So the ways that we frequently see people exporting these is the image and the PDD. And then when folks are sharing them for additional optimization, we also see them going in Automation Hub. Can you export this to Studio? Yes. Is it a production ready Studio file? No. And I never tell people it is. It requires updates even then. The key is understanding what the goal of your project was. In our scenario, we set the scene very clearly, right? We said the goal is to understand deviations and then to optimize further. The deviations were specifically targeting what are the deviations in completing our task given the different training that people have had. Those are the questions that lead to success, right? What are we looking to achieve and what is the actionable outcome of this? The tool is built to then basically set you up for success in a multitude of different ways, knowing that it's not always one answer, but maybe one or two or other answers in a multiple form. One thing that I'm looking to bring in the future is custom PDD templates. So that's something from Task Capture that folks really liked. Hey, I want to add my own logo and I want to add some additional information so we can keep it pretty consistent. We're looking to bring that. The other thing is raw data export. So we've had a ton of people say, hey, I took 35 traces and the duration times on these screens is all over the place. I want to look at this in Excel format because it's just easier for me to look at all 35 traces that way in the durations. Raw data export of that will allow you to do that. That's available data. We just need to, make available to you as the end user. And the third thing that I'm looking to bring is actually a little bit more of the BPMN modeling pieces. So everything you saw here is pretty linear and vertical. And a lot of Visios or BPMN flows are a little bit more horizontal and have those parallel flows. That's another area we're looking to invest in. So those are all active investigations that we have here with assisted task mining. Quick summary so far. We took our root technology from task capture, that desktop recorder. We evolved it into assisted task mining by bringing the core components of recording data with every click and type. In the scenario where we have a known task, we went and we captured variations of different known tasks, either by person, by training, by job, by different kind of task. This could have all been one person, just different tasks. And then we went and we tried to get a comprehensive view of that task. Now, what we need to decide throughout all of this process is what our goal was, right? Our end goal was to do X. It was to automate, optimize, or understand better. Could be all three of those, right? And we want to drive that end goal through these export or through the additional export features I just talked through. This is only one of many approaches to task mining. The reason why I lead with this approach is two reasons. One, we found it to be fairly successful across the board. We've had a lot of success with it, especially in the last year, across all industries. Two, this is kind of the leading cloud experience that we're seeing people adopt because of that time to value being really quick. It's not the only offering, so I'm going to deviate into the other offerings here, but I did want to note that is kind of what people are leading with. All right, so let's move to what else is out there. So as we recall, when I created my assisted task mining project, I had the opportunity to create something called an unassisted task mining project. Now, this is historically what we used to lead in the market with. The key scenario here, or the value proposition, is, hey, I have a team of people. I think I know the task, but I don't know the details of the task. And I don't really know why it's a bottleneck. So, for example, I have an expense reporting team, and I want to go capture what they do for maybe a week or two, always on, meaning it's capturing every click and type for 2 weeks. When I do that, I'm going to use a machine learning model to then digest that large set of data and give me some output. The reason why I did not lead with this, and I'm always very open about this is not always successful. Sometimes the output is exactly what people are looking for, and sometimes the machine learning model's output are things that might surprise you or things that you may not usually focus on. So I always tell folks, take it with a grain of salt and recognize that when we are looking at the machine learning model, we are truly looking at similarities of screens to meet a certain threshold. Then only we will output it as a task. It is possible. So, for example, you collected 40,000 clicks and types. It is possible that the output of this is only 1,000 of those, which does not mean that we didn't look at the other 39,000. We did. However, what we found is when looking at the entire 40,000, that 1,000 that we've identified and exported out to here and identified tasks are the most redundant and manually completed consistent actions in the flow provided, meaning across the team, it was the most consistent output that we saw. It's not to say that the other 39,000 don't matter. However, these are the most automatable tasks. And that's the goal of unassisted task mining. It's not to output tasks that you didn't know about. It's to output what we believe is the most automatable task. Now, when we look at that data, a couple things to do that really set you up for success, right? You want to limit that noise, as I mentioned earlier. So you're going to want to actually allow or deny applications in your settings. For example, in Concur, and obviously take this expense team and say, I'm going to allow Concur or allow the browser that I think they're going to concur with, but I might deny Microsoft Teams. I know they probably message about expenses, but I don't really care about those messages because they're not things that I can easily optimize. So I might deny Teams or Slack because it would introduce noise. I'm also going to pick folks that I know are doing this fairly consistently and it's a core part of their job. If this is something that Akhil does once every 2 weeks, I probably don't care to capture that data because I'm going to be introducing a lot of noise based off the other things he works on. So we've done that. Let's assume we've set ourselves up for success. We've captured our 2 weeks of data and we've run the machine learning model. We've gotten some output here, which we can see is a linear flow, but does have some variation. This is actually robot data that we use to generate this demo set, so that's why it's fairly linear. And then when we click into it, we have this concept of variance. So what we're basically saying is, hey, we see that you're completing this task. And again, the task is not what you decide is a task, but is what the machine learning model decides is a task, because it's the most redundant, consistent set of actions done in a certain form. And you're going to say, hey, this is the variant that we're looking at. Now, each existing trace is an instance, similar to assisted task mining, of completing that. So generally what folks are looking at here, and again, I'm going through this pretty quickly because there's a lot of content. So you're welcome to look at the Academy training as well for a little bit more detail and hands-on experience. But we basically took the root technology, which is clicks and types, screenshots of every single one of them, ran them through a machine learning model and clustered them or grouped them together by similarities. What we're looking for is the most redundant similarities and flows with redundant similarities. That's what's to believed to be automatable. It's very possible in this scenario, as you can see, this is a clean example of an expense scenario, but it's very possible that your business users actually do a variety of tasks at hand and that the machine learning model does not output all of those varieties of tasks. Well, what do I do then? My output wasn't perfect and I'm not entirely sure what to do. Well, there is one other thing that you can do if you don't enjoy the output of exactly what we've provided, which is to export the raw data. I always tell folks that this is kind of that last resort unless you have a data science team. We have folks that have entire data science teams that export this raw data and use that as input into understanding cycle times and variations. They have been successful in leveraging that click and type data to actually truly map out what they're looking for. This will give you all 40,000 actions. Here's the key. It's going to give it to you in a CSV format with exactly those clicks and types without the screenshots for context. So what it does require to do, even with that data science team, is to take that in parallel to somebody who probably understands the high level process and make sure that you digest all of those actions that you're looking at. At the core of it, the reason I would say two reasons why people haven't been successful with unassisted task mining historically. One is the expectation they have is that it's going to find all the tasks captured, all the distinct tasks captured. Well, it's not. The machine learning model is going to actually identify only the most redundant automatable tasks. And then the second is they don't set themselves up for success, whether it's by selecting a varied group of people who don't do the same kind of work or not allowing and denying right applications. The reason why I always call this out is it's not a clear recipe to success. It's a little bit of a convoluted recipe to success, but we have had scenarios where people have success with this. The time to value is longer than assisted task mining, which is why we lead with assisted task mining. Now, I've talked a ton about like our GA offerings, and I want to talk a little bit more about where we're going with the product because that's the exciting stuff, right? So let's say you've achieved success with the recorder technology as a whole. You've used assisted task mining, you've used unassisted task mining. You want to figure out what you can do next. Where can you really push the boundaries? What we've done is we've introduced a preview of something called workforce intelligence. I'm throwing more terminology at you, right? The key thing to take away is we've built on this recorder technology, and what we've heard from the market is we need to be able to expand the way that we record. So for example, I told you that unassisted task mining captures data for 2 weeks at a time, but it can really impact the user's machine because it's taking screenshots of every single click and type. So we've seen that before. Well, the way to modify that to truly make a recorder scalable is to capture data at scale in a different technology. Now, with workforce intelligence, what we're doing there, we'll pull up a sample project so you can see it, is we're basically using a very similar recorder technology, except for we are not taking screenshots of every click and type. Instead, we are capturing actions from OS and browser level events. So an example is when I opened up this browser to go to this weather app, instead of taking a screenshot of every single click and type, we might just say, hey, it's relevant data to know that Noopur went from this browser tab to this browser tab, and this is the duration of time she spent on it. And maybe it's relevant to know she added something to her clipboard. And then she went to Notepad, which was a different application, and copied and pasted, right? We would have durations and execution times for all of that, but we may not have screenshots for all of that. That's really what workforce intelligence is looking at. Now, the key reason why I call this out is because this is where the future of desktop recorder technology is going, capturing data at scale using a combination of OS browser level events with sometimes adding screenshots for context. The key here, if you're to take away anything, is we're investing in it. However, the reason why I said it's in preview is because we haven't figured out exactly how we're going GA with this. Now, the key is we think that it's relevant product and product market fit for our customers, But the question really becomes, how does this contribute to your automation story and to your larger data insight story with discovery? The next steps for us are really to connect this data at scale to the other product that does it best, which is looking at data at scale at process mining. So what we're looking forward to in Forward and Post Forward, which is our conference in the fall in 2410, is integrating recording data at scale, something similar to what you see here with workforce intelligence, where I can see the utilization of YouTube over multiple days or the utilization of Microsoft Word over multiple days with process mining data collected at scale. Now, if you have not had experience with process mining, I definitely recommend getting your hands on it. But imagine a scenario where you found some issues with your end-to-end flow. For example, in Concur, we collected the logs and we ingested them into process mining. And we found that high priority expense reports were not being approved fast enough. For example, it was identified that the bottleneck was 3 days longer than what we expected. What we might ask then in a natural way is, well, what was happening in those 3 days, right? What were folks doing, those managers that could be approving, rather than spending time actually approving them? Now, both what were they doing, and was there something that required additional data? Did they have to do some additional steps that we didn't see in Concur? Well, this is where task mining data collected at scale could really plug in. So we might say, hey, we don't know because there's no logs in Concur of what they were doing. We were just waiting for approval. But we did have task mining running in the background at scale, maybe in the form of what that workforce intelligence recorder is. And that told us that they were actually working 3 other approvals at the same time. And in order to get this expense report approved, they actually had to follow up for a receipt. And that receipt was communicated via Outlook and had to follow up with X person. Well, now we have answers as to what's going on. And now we might say, okay, moving forward, when an expense report of high priority is missing a receipt, send a flag to X person, right? That's a form of optimization rather than automation. The key here is taking large data from end-to-end flows and plugging in human activity data from desktop recorders. That is really where this is going. Now, the way that this is going to be positioned, where you'll actually see prototypes and relevant content that's actually built into the product, is going to be in 2410 for where we are announcing this at Forward. What I anticipate the future of discovery is going towards is both data collection in different forms at scale, meaning always on for long periods of time. And I think continuous monitoring is going to be a very important component to this. Different organizations do this in different ways. So one of the things to take away from this, I think, is what do you think your organization would benefit from? And what kind of approach would you take? We've got folks on the call whose organizations are data science heavy. They're going to take the data in its raw format and they're going to want to work through the different cycle times themselves, leveraging the raw data that's been collected from both process mining and task mining. But we've also got folks who maybe don't have the resources for that data science approach and actually want to be able to leverage it within the tool to go connect with those business needs to learn more. So it's good thinking about what you think, A, the goals are of discovery for you in the next 6 months, but also B, what kind of data and what form you want it in, because we want to accelerate that time to value for you. So last piece before I open it up to questions in the chat, in case there were any, is I just want to highlight again what's coming in the next coming months. So we are, again, by no means, we are not deprecating task capture. It is still available. Assisted task mining is currently in the cloud, but I am working on getting it into on-premise offerings next year. In the meantime, we are doing things like customer managed keys, continuously iterating on my ML model for that auto merge feature, as well as the task visualization. We're actively working on that integration between task mining and process mining because we truly believe in putting human activity data or desktop data into larger ERP data is the future of where discovery is going. And we're trying to optimize the recorder. The key here is no one's going to use your recorder if it hurts their machine and they can't get their day-to-day work done, right? So we need to make sure that we have that perfect recorder that's going to collect all the relevant data with no performance impacts. We've made significant strides in the last year, and we're looking to become the market leader in doing that. Last but not least, again, those action drivers I mentioned when we were talking about assisted task mining and task mining in general, being able to get that XAML export improved so we can get production ready sooner. That PDD customization, and the raw data that we were talking about. So different forms based off of what your organization needs for their actionability. I'm going to pause really quick because I see Akhil's on here. Akhil, anything I forgot that you would add to this? You've worked with plenty of customers as well as different projects on their use of the projects and assisted task mining. What would you add?
Yes, so definitely. Like, thank you, Nupur, for adding that value for the assisted, unassisted, and workforce intelligence. So, in my previous session, if you all know, like I covered pretty much about assisted task mining only. So today, Nupur gave that idea about workforce intelligence, the future of it, current map and roadmap of task mining. So the only value I would add here is related with because I work with a lot of customers related to task mining. So I found that like their major goal is to find like look for the process improvements and kind of a standardization of the process. So consider that they have one process, like one of the processes same incident management, but and there are like 10 people working on this and they're doing it in a different way. So their problem is like one person is doing it in like 10 minutes, another person is doing the same process in 1 hour, so they can't figure out like how what exactly is going wrong, and they cannot target each person separately, sit around with them and look for that what exactly going on. So this tool provides the like centralized management system, like where you they can individually they can work without any kind of a disturbance or anything like that. And at the end, the business analyst or a task mining expert comes into the picture, look for that and standardize the process, and you can easily train the user. So that was a major thing I saw when I worked with the customers. Like they were mainly looking for standardization and automation. When it comes to automation, definitely we should be mainly going for unassisted task mining. So that these are like two things for known task and unknown task that we should be.
Yeah. And we position it as known and unknown tasks, but I always tell people I don't think you're truly successful with either if you don't have some context around what you're looking for. So even if you don't know the individual task that you're looking to optimize, you need to know if you're optimizing, standardizing, collecting data to just ground yourself in data, or truly driving towards automation. You have to have push your organization to have those strategic goals preset before you go ask any business users for data. When we ask business users for data, we are interrupting their day-to-day functions and we are asking more of them. So not only do we have to be very cognizant of that, but we want to make sure that we have a very clear strategic goal. I have folks and customers come to me all the time that say, we were just collecting data because we want to know what's happening on the ground. We think something's happening, but we don't know. If you don't know what's happening, even in the smaller scope level, you don't need to know every detail, but you do need to smaller scope it. You need to start talking to your business needs or the middle level management above your business needs. Without that, you are deploying recorders, you're going to collect data, and data is going to be collected at such a scale that it's going to be hard to pinpoint truly what it is that you need. Russell had a great question actually in the chat about how this fits in and contributes to the larger unified platform or process orchestration initiative. That's a great question, Russell. So what I described to you in more words than a few was basically integration of process mining and assisted task mining, or task mining at scale also. The way that that fits into the larger scale of things is that is actually our vision for unified discovery. Now, what I imagine you'll see in unified platform is 3 pillars: unified discovery, unified build, and unified admin, all connected with a thread across. That thread across is process orchestration. So this absolutely contributes to process orchestration. We know for a fact that process orchestration many a times is rooted in the need to continuously monitor. And so we believe that the contribution of desktop data, human activity data, to that monitoring through either just task mining or integration of task mining into process mining to monitor it will help drive the future initiatives that you want to take from the findings in process orchestration. So we are thinking about it from 2 perspectives, and they kind of are all under the umbrella of the work that we're doing across the platform, but it's unified discovery, as well as how do we add value to the thread that is process orchestration. Great question. All right, I'm going to give one more opportunity for any other questions in the chat.
Actually, I
My,
got one
go ahead.
question that is in the future, like, will it be possible to export the process to Studio and build an automation with this? So, I
Mhm.
like just an answer, like I answered it already, but if for everyone, so we already offer that exporting part to the Studio. So you can always, whenever you like record your trace, you can always go there and export it as a XAML. So you can get the bits and pieces like in the module for each
Mhm.
one of them, so you can directly go and actually use it as a skeleton for your automation. So
Yes.
that's definitely there, and as Nupur mentioned, that is in the action driver as well, that we are improving that, so that is still in progress, but we still offer that.
Yeah. And I'm always very honest with people. I try not to oversell them. I used to build studio POCs as a sales engineer. They are not perfect. The reason why Akil was very specific in his words was he said skeleton for your process, right? So it's an outline. It's something to hand off to an RPA developer to optimize in Studio. And it basically converts those clicks and types of the visual that you see in the task graph into what that outline would be. If we're using best practices, you're going to want to use RE framework. You're going to want to use and include the right activity packs or translate this into, different connectors. So they may use that as input to translate to a production ready, automation, but it will not be production ready. And we should not set the expectation that it would be with your developer either. All right. Cool. I think that's about all the content that we had for you guys. I hope that this was helpful, especially in the context of where we are going. If you have follow-up questions or if things come up across the way with your organization, how they might be able to utilize this specific product or other discovery components, my email is just my first name dot my last name at uipath.com, and you are more than welcome to reach out. We are always looking for folks that are wanting to get more involved with the product. So any feedback you have or any questions you have, please feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Noopur and Akil, for being here and running this session. And also just remember that tomorrow the recording will be available for this event. So as Noopur mentioned, her email will be in there as well, her name. If you guys have any questions, you can reach out to me as well, and Russell. So with that, we really appreciate you guys coming tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, everyone.